Hello. So today I'd like to talk to you about scheduling, and I'm going to start with a story. When I was a new mom, basically, I think that was the first time that scheduling really hit me badly. I was invited for a party, and it was a kids' party. It was for my I think she was about one then. And I recall, thinking I had it on my fridge. Get that? And the time was there. It was right there on my fridge, the invitation. However, for some reason, I knew the date it was going to occur, but for some reason I thought it was at 4 p.m. in the evening. And I remember that when it was close to 4, I got my daughter dressed up in the party dress, etc., drove to this person's house, knocked. Number one, I was first surprised that there were no cars outside, because the party was within the person's house. Knocked and got inside, and alas, they were cleaning up. And then the husband just said, you're just coming, spoke in my language. And I was like, yeah, what time was the party? And he said, oh, we had the party earlier during the day. So for some reason, my own mind felt that a party was going to start at 4 o'clock, sometime in the evening. However, this occurred earlier in the day, probably because it was a kids' party, or maybe that was when the parents had time. But the crux of the matter is that I forgot, or I did not know what time it was, right? And if you think about that, most of the times when the mistakes we make when it comes to productivity is that sometimes we do not want to use apps, we do not want to use prompters, we rely so much on our memory. And as a mom that's got a lot going on, sometimes your memory might not just be efficient enough. I am not saying you do not have the mind of Christ. Of course, you have the mind of Christ, but God has also created systems in place for us that we can utilize. Get that? He has created systems in place for us that we can utilize. And one thing I was thinking about recently is that our God is not haphazard. Basically, if you look at how he created the world in the book of Genesis, right? You see that can you ask the question, why didn't he create the fish of the sea first, right? He knew we needed fish. Why didn't he create that prior to creating the waters, prior to separating the waters from the earth? He is a strategic God. And we as humans, if we are supposed to be children of God, who reflect who God is, who are meant to shine out his light, then we also have to be strategic. Now, you can't be strategic if you are living haphazardly. You might have certain goals, things that God has placed on your heart. However, if you do not break them down or ask yourself per week, what have I done in relation to this thing? Then you'll find out that you start the year with a massive goal. And at the end of the year, you've really done nothing about it. It's all about strategically planning on how you're going to execute it, creating a system that works for you. And one of the ways you can create that system is, number one, we've spoken about believing that it works, believing that you can actually do it. You understand? Because if you do not believe, then it seems as if you are fighting against the bricks, you are kicking against bricks, because somehow your belief system is going to autocorrect you back. So number one is for you to have a strong belief that, hey, this goal I have set beginning of this year, this thing that God has told me to do, he has given unto me the resources that I need to be able to execute effectively. Then the second thing you need to do is to document that system that you want to put in place. Never for once feel that the system, that documentation takes your time. And when I say document, you could choose to use your Google Calendar by documenting it, you understand? By breaking it. So naturally, we would say break down the goal. So for instance, maybe what's burning in your heart is that you want to write a book, right? Break it down into the different days of the week. Consider things that are recurring, because one of the mistakes we make is that we overschedule sometimes, and we forget that sometimes we are in transit or we are commuting from work home. You don't give time for that. You don't give time to cook. You don't give time to spend with your kids to complete their assignments. You understand? On a weekday, if I'm going to do anything, I do not schedule it till about 6:30 at night, because that's what works for me. When I schedule it for 6:30, basically, that's because I've looked at everything that I have to do. Sometimes I get home at 5, sometimes 5:15. Of course, I need to cook. So I'm not going to put, write that book at 5:30. Get that? So make sure you document it. Sit down at the beginning of the week, decide that, okay, within this huge writing of book goal that I've got, what chapters can I should I say, practically write during the week. Of course, I want to also stretch myself. So I usually give myself a stretch goal. So if I say I'm going to write about 3 chapters, in the long run, maybe I'm actually saying stretch goal, write 4 chapters, basically something like that. And make sure you document it. So if you're using your Google Calendar, make sure it's the kind of calendar that gives you that reminder. So for me, I rarely use Google Calendar for one reason, because my phone is always on silent. So if I need to get something done at 6:30, I need to ensure that I have an alarm set for that time with my alarm's title, saying write book now. And now what that reminder does for you is, even if you are running behind schedule, at least it's jigged your memory and you know what you're supposed to do. If you do not document what you're meant to do per time every single day, what you'll find is that sometimes you'll be living on autopilot. So you would have time to do stuff, but you are now on autopilot. You are not sure what to do per time, etc. And the time comes and you're like, oh, I think I'm free at this time. Maybe I should just do this. So document and make sure that within your documentation, so we've spoken about goals, that you also factor in times for rest, and you also factor in times for your personal growth. So your personal growth will be what you are doing to grow, to be that person who can effectively execute that goal. You understand? It could be reading a book, it could be doing a course, it could be, also scheduling time that you spend with God. So whatever you find as a priority in your life, you must include it in your schedule. And this is where I'm going to stop today. Remember these key things. Number one, remember that you have to build a belief system that enables you do what God has called you to do without auto-correcting to the fact that you really do not believe you can do it. So if you go back to my previous series, we spoke a lot about the index of belief. So go there and watch it. And if you've got questions, do reach out to me. Then number two, ensure that you document what's important to you. Never feel that it takes time. Number three, make sure you use prompters. Now, the prompters are your alarms, what's going to ring out and then let you know that it's actually time for that. Number five, I think I'm on 5. Make sure you also plan for recurring items. Those things that you do, like for instance, you are stuck in traffic, you are meant to cook, maybe you're meant to help your kids with homework. Make sure you factor that into your scheduling so that you are not over scheduling. Number 6, make sure you factor in your rest and your growth. Also make sure you factor in your time with God, basically as a Christian, because if God has given you the vision, then you should always be talking to him so that he gives you the strategies. And that's where I'm going to end this today. Have a good day.